We are.
Very
Yes.
well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the date and time and place set forth for the pre-hearing conference in case number 192 of 20, Independent Citizen Police Review Board on behalf of Carla Bradley, the complainant, versus Police Officer Matthew Moon, badge number 4610, also known as the subject officer. Ms. Pittenger, should I also include the other subject officer at this time?
Yes, so we can enter into the record that of his separation.
Are we having two separate pre-hearing conferences, or are we doing one jointly for both officers?
This is one pre-hearing conference for that case. There will be, we will eliminate the first officer, Tranter, because he is separated. He is no longer employed by the city of Pittsburgh. So he is no longer under the board's jurisdiction. The remaining officer, Officer Moon, is part of that complaint, and he's represented by Mr. Zimbala.
Thank you for that clarification. Just so the record is clear, we will proceed with this pre-hearing conference with respect to only subject officer Matthew Moon. The hearing panel consists of Dr. Mary Jo Gershio, who is chair, Mr. Sheldon Williams, and Mr. Raymond Robinson. My name is Bill Ward. I am the solicitor for the Independent Citizen Police Review Board, but I also will serve as the hearing officer in this matter. The record is being transcribed by network deposition. Further, an audio or video record is being memorialized with Zoom online meeting software. Would the special prosecutor for the executive director please identify himself for the record?
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Jeff Reuter.
Thank you, Mr. Reuter. Welcome. Is the complainant Carla Bradley present?
She is not, Your Honor.
Very well. Will counsel for the subject officer please identify himself for the record?
Christopher Cimbala here on behalf of Matthew Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Cimbala. Welcome. Is the subject officer Matthew Moon present?
No, he is not, Your Honor.
Okay. Is there any reasons that I should explore for the absence of both Ms. Bradley and Officer Moon?
With respect to Officer Moon, I did reach out to an investigator, David Elwood, and I asked if he required Officer Moon's attendance, in which he said he did not. So I did not have Officer Moon attend today's hearing, as I thought that the CPRB was in agreement.
Mr. Reuter, is that acceptable?
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. As a preliminary matter, I request that the executive director, Ms. Pittenger, read into the record the series of entries regarding notifications, charges, and public notice as it pertains to Officer Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. We're willing to waive the reading of those charges if that's acceptable to Mr. Zimbala.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Is it necessary for you to describe the dates that the subpoenas were delivered to the complainant and subject officer?
I believe those may have been forwarded to you, Mr. Ward.
I have the subject officer and the complainant both being notified on May 6, 2022.
Yes.
Okay. Likewise, with respect to the dates of publication of notice in the media, my information has that it was published in a newspaper on May 12, 2022, and on the website, presumably for the board, on May 12, 2022. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
I also have a note here that the date the file became available to the subject officer and his counsel was on or about May 17, 2022. Does that sound right, Mr. Cimbala?
I believe it was May 18th when the file was delivered to my office. It was Friday, May 18th.
Okay. We'll note that for the record. Ms. Pittenger, the next area of inquiry is to state the alleged policy violations but you have already obtained a waiver of the reading of the charges. So I would likewise assume that the summary of the alleged violations will also be waived.
Yes.
Okay. Have there been any amendments to the original charges?
Not for Officer Moon.
Members of the panel, we have established that the parties are willing to waive the reading of the charges. Can I assume, Dr. Gershio, that the panel is also willing to waive the reading of the charges and to enter the charging document into the record?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Does the special prosecutor wish to disclose his list of witnesses and evidence to the subject officer's counsel?
Mr. Ward, the special prosecutor is in the process of reviewing the file, and we would prefer, if possible, to offer that at a later date, but certainly one that does not prejudice Mr. Cimbala.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Cimbala?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Are there any matters that need to be addressed related to the appearances at the public hearing?
We're not anticipating them, but should we become aware of them, we will certainly notify Mr. Cimbala and the hearing officer.
That sounds acceptable. Does the subject Officer Moon need subpoenas to issue for witnesses or for evidence?
Not at this time, Mr. Ward. But as we delve into the material and prepare our case, I will certainly let you and the others know if the need for subpoenas arises. But as we sit here today, that does not appear to be an issue.
Very well, thank you. Is the special prosecutor aware of anything that should be brought to the attention of this panel that might resolve the issues in this case prior to a public hearing? We've already discussed the fact that Officer Ryan Trantor has been separated from the Bureau, so that would be a relevant fact to the panel to consider. Is there anything else, either Mr. Reuter or Ms. Pittenger?
Mr. Ward, I do, and I would bring this up because we're all involved in this particular, what are we going to do with this situation, this case, whether to go forward or not go forward, since Officer Trantor has left the city. It's my opinion that Officer Moon conducted himself pursuant to the direction, if you will, from Officer Trantor, with the most egregious issue being Officer Trantor's conduct when the victim was pulled over. I am hesitant to proceed to a public hearing on this matter because I'm not confident that Officer Moon acted in an unreasonable way. And I'm not confident that the accusation we made that he had a pretextual traffic stop would be borne out by the evidence that we have. And so I guess I'm saying to you, Mr. Ward, and to the panel chairperson, that I would like to withdraw the complaint and stop it from going forward to a public hearing, because I do not think it would be reasonable, or rather that Officer Moon's conduct was unreasonable given the circumstances that we have learned of, and that the primary officer whose conduct initiated the whole stop and the what happened afterwards is gone. I think if we were looking at Officer Moon's conduct in isolation without the involvement of Officer Trantor, I would have been very comfortable recommending that the complaint be disposed of as unsustainable. But as a companion conduct to that of Officer Trantor, it elevated it to a different level of concern. So I would like to withdraw the complaint against Officer Moon.
Mr. Cimbalo, your thoughts?
I have no objection to the CPRB's request to withdraw as it relates to Officer Moon, and understanding that the CPRB has already withdrawn as it relates to Officer Tranter. Yes, I have no objection.
I would think not. But I understand the distinction. The board took the approach of withdrawing with respect to Officer Tranter because it lacked jurisdiction over a former subject officer who not only is no longer with the Bureau, but is also no longer in the state, when I heard Ms. Pittenger's comments. I understand the cascading effect when there are two officers involved. I also understand that when one officer whose conduct is perceived to be more egregious than the others, that when you're left with only the second officer, the evaluation may shift. Mr. Rutter, before I ask the panel for their input, do you have any thoughts or comments?
I really don't. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Gershow, we've heard from the executive director, counsel for the subject officer, and the special prosecutor regarding the issue of the board's, through the executive director, proposed withdrawal of the charges against subject officer Moon. Does the panel have any questions for the parties who are not present, or their counsel who are present, with respect to the proposal made by Ms. Pittenger to withdraw the charges against subject officer Moon? Any questions from the panel?
Colleagues? Mr. Williams?
Mr. Williams has none.
Robinson? Okay.
No comment.
Mr. Robinson?
I guess I'm following the logic there that the case against Officer Moon. No comments. I heard Ms. Pittenger's comment on that too.
Dr. Gershow, do you have comments?
So I just want to make clarity that the secondary officer may not have acted the way in which he did had he had not following the procedure of the first officer. Is that what we're hearing here?
Yes, Mr. Ward, may I
Yes,
describe
please.
it a little? What we are alleging is that Officer Tranter had directed or had radioed ahead, had called the other officer and asked him to pull this guy. He knew him. And at that point, the secondary officer, Moon, proceeded to follow the subject. The subject made maybe a stop, maybe not a complete stop. I can't say absolutely certainly that he stopped or he didn't. And then went the next block and made a left. It was at the time that the car was stopped that there was an altercation between Tranter and the subject. So the conduct that's at question here is that of Moon's. Was it a pretextual stop or was it reasonable? And I think Moon would not have known why Tranter told him, pull him, I know him. There could have been an outstanding warrant. There could have been a number of other things there that Moon would not have known, but he hears another officer saying, pull that guy, I know him. That leaves us with the question of whether or not the traffic stop, whether he actually rolled or stopped at the stop sign, whether that's false or true. I don't believe it merits the level of scrutiny that we would have placed on the complaint had both officers remained. So I just don't think that Moon stands on his own as engaged in misconduct that you would be concerned about. As I said, if this was a regular complaint
Pullover.
and it was just what I described about Officer Moon,
Mhm.
I would have been quite comfortable recommending to the board to dismiss it as unsustainable. Because there are too many factors there we don't know. And which actually brings us, if we kept going and this complaint was heard publicly, full blown public hearing, your findings against Officer Moon may well have been unsustained, simply because Moon's conduct is questionable. So you're not really going to arrive at a finding, but his involvement with Tranter, they made it a different story together when the vehicle was stopped. But we didn't charge anything beyond the unbecoming conduct, the pretextual traffic stop, and reporting, I believe, was the third charge.
Um,
Yeah, the third charge was truthfulness in connection with
Truthfulness.
reporting.
no.
So
Thank you.
in view of that representation of the executive director's perspective of the case as it now stands as of May 24th, the question for the panel is, do you proceed with a public hearing against Officer Moon hereafter, or do you vote to ratify the suggestion proposed by the executive director without objection from the special prosecutor that the charges against Officer Moon be withdrawn?
And colleagues were okay with it being withdrawn.
I concur.
I'm in total agreement.
Okay. So we agree.
Well, I didn't hear from Mr. Robinson.
I said I agree.
You were muted. I missed that.
Okay.
And Dr. Gershow, you agree as well?
Correct.
All right, so it's unanimous that the three-member panel has voted to approve the proposal submitted by Ms. Bittinger for the withdrawal of all charges, namely the three just described, against Matthew Moon.
Correct.
So consequently, there will be no public hearing, and there is nothing for us to schedule. So is there anything else that we need to add to the record before we adjourn and conclude the hearing? Mr. Ruder, anything to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Ward.
Mr. Simbala, anything to add?
Nothing additional, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Pittenger, how is notice provided? I mean, this is a public pre-hearing conference. Counsel for the subject officer is present. Is there anything that's sent, any paperwork, or is it just the decision of the board of the panel rather, that's satisfactory?
Well, I would ask Mr. Zimbala to inform his client as soon as he can, and we will follow up with a letter indicating that the board, that the complaint was withdrawn with the approval of the hearing panel.
Okay.
I will note the officer this evening.
Thank you.
Does the panel's decision need ratification by the entire board? Or is it sufficient for the three to have voted unanimously here?
I believe that's sufficient under the rules.
Fair enough. Okay. Hearing nothing further at this point, I recommend that we be adjourned. The time is now 6:13. I want to thank not only Ms. Pittenger, but the two lawyers on this case, Mr. Ruder and Mr. Simbala, for their continuously effective representation of their clients. Also want to thank the panel for participating as effectively as they did tonight. So with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
And board members, do you want to take 2 minutes? Where you want to just roll right into the meeting?
I'm ready to roll. Others?
I'm ready.
I'm sorry, this is a court reporter. I just have one question. I'm actually two. I'm going to guess that Officer Moon would be spelled M-O-O-N.
Correct.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And then how about the officer who is Trantor?
Tranter.
All right.
Beth, on the complaint, it's spelled T-O-R, so I'm not sure which is correct.
ER is the correct spelling.
E-R, okay.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you
Public
for-
Order.
Thank you. Okay,
Very well.
Dr. Gershio. Dr. Darby, Lucas Darby will not be here this evening, so
I'm on again.
you will assume acting as the chair, please.
No problem. Can we have the agenda up? Because I only have one screen here, so
Yep.
cool. Thank you.
And
I'll put it right up.
I should make a note that this meeting is still being recorded.
Yes.
Thank you.
One second, I'm coming. I'm sorry.
Well, while we're waiting for the agenda to appear, I wish the Citizen Police Review Board a happy 25th birthday. 25 years. Yeah,
It seems like yesterday.
yes, it does. Has a whole different ring to it than 10 years, 15 years, 25.
Wow.
Well, if you're a teenager, let's say at 15, you look forward to the next 10 years thereafter so that your prefrontal lobe will be fully formed. So I'm inclined to suspect that with 25 years under our belt, we are fully formed.
Has that happened? Wow.
Wow.
I can't
don't-
pull it up, Beth. It won't let me share it.
Thanks, Ozark.
Okay, let me,
But there it is.
Did it come up?
There you go.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know what was going on. I'm sorry.
We got it. Alrighty, I'm sorry, everybody, for being a little late. We had a pre-conference hearing, so we will start with the agenda. So calling this to order, the recognized excused absences are Dr. Darby, Mr. Green. I'm looking on my little thing here. Ms. McClellan. Who am I missing?
Miss Brown,
Ms. Brown.
yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Green, I believe,
He is here.
is here.
Oh,
yes.
sorry, Mr. Green. I didn't see your name. Very sorry. So you call this meeting to order. And did everybody have a chance to see our April 26th minutes? And if you have, can we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I make the motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you. Second?
Mr.
Does
Green or
anybody
Mr.
object to
Williams?
anything?
Yeah,
Does anyone,
I was going to do that next after the second.
I made the motion, so it's not on me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Robinson or Mr. Green?
I wasn't there, but I'll second as what I read.
Okay. Any changes, any discussion to the minutes of 426? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
We don't need to vote.
Oh, I thought we did for that. We have to accept them, right?
since there's been no objection voiced, you
Sorry.
can adopt them as
Sure.
distributed. You're good.
So done?
Yep.
All right. Beth, it is your
Yes.
turn.
Okay, Dr. Gersha, thank you very much. Members, good evening, and thank you for your engagement in the pre-hearing conference that preceded this hearing or this meeting. We've been going back and forth with having individuals, members here for some discussions and then not here for the discussions we want to be here for. So I wanted to start tonight for my part. I'm going to try to share a screen here. Can I do that while you're doing what you're doing there? I stopped you. I'm very sorry. Forgive me.
No, that was, you're good. You should be able to
Okay.
share now.
Okay, well, that's fine, except that it's not coming up for me. So let me get out of here. I'll come back to that. This afternoon, or this morning rather, we made history, if you will, if you saw the news. The first joint performance audit conducted by the City Controller's Office and the review board was released. City Controller Lamb and I had an opportunity to describe what the findings were, our recommendations. It received a great deal of media attention and interest. It's important to note that I don't think that the link was sent out to everyone, but now that it was released, I will send that out to you tonight. The report is about 93 pages long. There were 23 recommendations that came from the report. And they were all offered as constructive advice. The Police Bureau responded to those 23 recommendations in a very positive, receptive manner, which is very encouraging. Among those recommendations was what you'll hear about is a disparity that was identified in the arrests related to marijuana use and marijuana possession. You'll recall back in 2016, Pittsburgh decriminalized possession and use of small amounts of marijuana. We also know that as another external influence that we keep running into, state and federal law is much different than the city of Pittsburgh's ordinance. So officers retain the discretion to charge an individual with marijuana use or possession under a state law, which is more stringent than is the city ordinance, or the option of issuing a citation as available under the city ordinance. What we found was that 85% of people arrested for marijuana related charges in 2020, 85% of those individuals were African American. There's something wrong with that. When you look at the people who were arrested in 2020 for only a marijuana charge, I think there was 139 of them, 90% of them were African American. So there's a disparity there in the application and the enforcement of the marijuana laws, but it's indicative that there must be something else wrong. We saw that also in traffic stops. And in this discussion today, we also identified CREA, the Criminal History Record Information Act, as being another external force that influences the Bureau's ability to be as transparent as the community desires them to be and as accountable as the community demands them to be. And that's because documents prepared by police are shielded unless they are entered into evidence in a courtroom, at which time they become public, but otherwise they remain shielded and beyond public reach. Similarly, Act 22 of 2017, that state statute puts rigorous access limitations for public access to police sworn video. It's very stringent. It's an onerous process. But all of those things they're all state related issues that only the state legislature can change. And that has a distinct influence on the ability of the local jurisdictions to create their own policies and adapt enforcement tactics and enforcement priorities because they're limited by the state statute. So those ambiguities that emerge continue to affect the ability of the Bureau to be innovative. We also had, and I'm looking here for the other highlights. the data reporting that's currently being implemented by the Bureau. Several years back, there was a controversy around the use of a private software company called B3. And B3 had an exclusive contract with the city of Pittsburgh to develop software systems. And they would develop them, they would maintain them, they would service them, they would upgrade them. It became a very proprietary situation and circumstance. Way back, I'm going to go back to about 2013. City Council allocated $100 and some thousand so that the police daily run sheet and traffic stops and things of that nature that would combine into one report and allow all those data points to be captured and automatically populate a report that was supposed to have been created and provided and in business and operating by 2015. This is still not operating. So there's another system that we identified in this audit called, no, I don't remember what it was. Anyway, it's a system that was contracted through Inform RMS, Inform Record Management System. That's the name of the software program, through Allegheny County Emergency Services. The city could participate in this project at very minimal cost, and it would integrate all of the data. It would enhance the efficiencies of police reporting, and it would allow for seamless continuity for the Bureau of Police to report to the state and the federal uniform crime reporting systems, and to the 2019 initiated FBI use of force database. Now, what's interesting about the use of force database is after the death of George Floyd and other high-profile deaths involving police officers, it was realized that there was no national clearinghouse for data related to deaths resulting from police use of force. So the FBI was pressured into creating this system, and it went live in 2019. And it collects information from all police departments that wish to participate. It's a volunteer thing, it's voluntary participation, that they will capture that data. But the hook is that for each state, you have to have 60% of your law enforcement agencies reporting to that system before the state's system and the information becomes public. So what we've learned is that at 57%, I think it's 57.3% of the law enforcement agencies in Pennsylvania are participating. And Pittsburgh has been, to their credit, but we need to up that a little bit so that we can have the full disclosure of use of force practices and outcomes in the Commonwealth, because right now that is not available as one collective. We noted that the Community Engagement Office of the Bureau of Police has done a great job with visibility, with engaging with a lot of activities in neighborhoods. But what was missing, and I guess you could say in this day of data-informed decision-making and measurement, the quality of those activities was really being hidden by quantity. We didn't have any way of capturing the quality of service or defining how the Community Engagement Office, their work, if it had any influence on violent crime trends, on community relations with police, general neighborhood wellness. So we recommended that the Community Engagement Office pursue an academic partner that can help devise a model that would provide some manner of measuring if their activities do have a direct correlate to community wellness. The report is readily available. I'll send you the link, but it's also available online. Stephanie, maybe somebody could find it and put it up on the, put it on the
Yep.
chat.
I'll look.
Thank
and-
you.
Yep.
Thank you.
welcome.
Any questions about the audit?
None? I hear colleagues?
No
Okay.
questions, but good job to the board.
Yeah, it really was remarkable. Yeah, it was remarkable. I mean, it's the first time that that's ever happened and been done. I found it to be almost intimidating because we endured the performance audit 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and I've lost you all. I apologize. I assume I'm still visible to you though.
Yeah.
Okay. So having gone through a performance audit, we know that it's a grueling process. They're serious. They're very serious. So it was somewhat intimidating to think of being associated to them and basically doing to the Bureau of Police what they did to us. But it was a tremendous learning experience. It was a refreshing engagement with people who had, they were learning. They were objectively looking at information and at practices. It was a great experience. They did a fantastic job. And as I said before, the Bureau did respond well to the recommendations. In fact, they only disagreed with one. And that one happened to be a recommendation we made that the monthly compliance checks for body-worn camera policy compliance be removed from internal control and moved to an external group such as the Citizen Police Review Board. They declined that recommendation. That was the only one. And they also identified the Criminal History Record Information Act as being a part of the reasoning, as well as Act 22 of 2017. So it was very good. I think you'll get a lot of insight if you go through that report. Now, we had a couple of reports outstanding. One being the Taser briefing for 2022. That was circulated to members some time ago. I don't know if you wish to discuss that tonight, if you wish to adopt it, if you want to do something else with it. I don't know what your pleasure is, but I did have it on my list to bring back that and the protest report, the after action review that I think that came out to you in March.
Correct.
March, yeah. And then in April, I believe the Taser report came out to you.
And I thought that we were bringing it to the board tonight for any input. We wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to hear, read, and be heard. And so, to my colleagues.
That was my understanding as well, Dr. Gershio, from our last meeting, was to give opportunity for all members of the board to be present when adopting or making the decision to adopt. And I believe the caveat was when it was communicated via email, if they had any input, if they were expected to be absent. So I would not be in, I'd be more inclined to go ahead and make whatever motion and acceptance or vote on this today, since we've given that previous opportunity for anyone who would be missing this month's meeting.
And that's completely consistent with Mr. Williams' comments at the April meeting. If you look at page 3 of the minutes, it was clear that he wanted to provide an opportunity for all the board members who were at that point not present in April to have an opportunity to give their comments either prior to tonight's meeting or preferably at tonight's meeting. So I see no reason from a Sunshine Act perspective why this cannot proceed to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. And does any members, Beth, did you receive any feedback from any of the members that weren't able to attend this evening?
No, I did not.
Okay. So, other colleagues, any questions, concerns, comments before we make a motion?
My only comment in reading both of these documents that I am impressed with the volume of information, explanation, and detail that has been provided. I think it would be extremely helpful for those who would like to interact with these documents to get better understanding on various things, but also could be future opportunity for discussion. So I just want to give my compliment to the efforts to bring such a thorough report to us and to be disseminated for others to be able to absorb.
Thank you,
Here, here.
Mr. Williams.
Here, here. Agree. Others?
I guess my only thought is just on and I do apologize. I did not look over it earlier. But there's, I don't know, it seems like it's, I mean, at the end, there's nothing to applaud or critique. And yet you pointed out several things in the report. Like, I think the report is very thorough, but I guess I was wondering, how does this benefit the Bureau? What will the Bureau do with this report?
With the Taser Briefing report,
Yes.
it's not for the Bureau.
Okay.
So it was not compiled with that reader's perspective in mind. It was to provide generic information related to the background of Taser as a tool. It's the practices around using Taser, and an update to the board's 2004 and 2005 briefings. So it was compiled for the sake of a general information, informative document.
Okay, and that makes sense. And I guess what I remember from a couple months ago, we were talking about the board coming out with a position on the Bureau's new policy or the change in their policy, correct?
Yeah, that initiated the discussion. And
Okay,
that
all
was
right.
whether it should be at a level right below deadly force, or now in the matrix of force model, it falls down to around a level 3. And we described all of that inside of that, inside that report. Mr. Robinson, you're quite correct. That was what initiated the discussion, and it was seeking the board's opinion whether or not its level was okay where it was moved to, or if you would prefer it to be at a lower level of force or a higher level of force.
All right, and did I miss something there? Does this have any of those findings, or is that our discussion at this point?
That's a discussion that you would probably want to have.
Okay.
And as I think Mr. Williams, you suggested for future discussion, this could be the primer that's adopted as the documents informing the discussion, and schedule that discussion for perhaps the next month. If this is adopted by you, it's published. The public can comment, they can make suggestions, they can try to influence your understanding of why it should be at one level of force or another level of force. And that would further inform you for a discussion at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ms. Pittenger, you're spot on as to what my thinking would be is not to dismiss or to demean anyone's understanding about Taser or tactics, but the documents provide a wealth of information for which, when decisions are made, or I don't think a decision today would be appropriate. I think the adoption is so that there's a basis of understanding that you could move from, and also be able to interact, as you said, if there was other input or whatever, but you also are able to to develop that by looking at some of the statistics, the detail of it, the history, the information, and that helps to inform a decision, could help to inform a decision. But the baseline is when people would ask, how are we getting to this decision? At least we have some document that actually helps to support why one would make that decision instead of arbitrarily just making such decisions without having something to go on. And my preference in doing that, even with the board, was to say, I understand Taser to a different extent than some of my colleagues. And this could at least provide some information so that we all have an equal vote, but at least now the level of understanding is also being levelized so that they can make some reasonable decisions about what it is they're being asked.
Thank you both for that.
You're welcome.
So if there's no further discussion, would someone like to make a motion to accept should we do these individually so that we could look at these individually reports, or just do them together?
I believe you should do them separately, Dr. Gershio.
I agree.
Okay. So the one that's up is the Taser briefing. So do I hear a motion for the board to accept the report as given and distributed?
I'll make such motion.
Thank you, sir. Second?
I will second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And then we need a motion for the second report,
Let me get that up here.
please.
Yes, I am. And just while I'm hopefully accomplishing this, this will enable you to put this, we will publish this, but you can then put deliberations on the agenda and it will all comply to sunshine, which is what we want. I'm working with two boards here. Nope. No, it's not coming up. Would you like to start the discussion, Dr. Gershio, while I'm having a little bit of a technical problem here? My apologies.
All right. So first we have to put the motion on the table. Do I hear a motion?
We're gonna, the discussion on the second report or the one we just,
No, second.
well, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir. Second?
And this is prior to discussion.
Yeah, and then as soon as we do second, then we'll do discussion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Yes, I guess I guess my first question is getting some historical context when reports such as this are created. I noticed a lot of the discussion in there, it was limited by I guess the police department's reluctance to participate. And just curious, is that often the trend? Was that because there was litigation attached to this? And is that always the case with litigation? Just wondering how much do we leave out or miss out of something like this? Because the report looked great, by the way. But if we don't have that input, what are we missing?
Well, we had a very difficult time obtaining information from the Bureau of Police. And part of that was related to the Criminal History Record Information Act, that they declined to provide investigative reports that would have been helpful in establishing some of the dynamics that were observed by police officers, as well as their tactical approach and how they deployed the officers for public order, crowd control. For example, they use the special response team. Special response team is different from a SWAT team. It's different from patrol. It's different from, I'm not sure now if they even still have the rapid deployment team, but they have these different units. And for us to understand exactly what they did and how they did it, we were not given that information. We engaged the densest group. Mr. Robinson, you're not familiar with that whole situation, are you?
How you got to that point? Yeah, I mean, I know what happened, and I know that, yeah, you shared it previously that you couldn't get information. You reached out, or I guess we somehow solicited this outside entity to do to look
right.
at the,
And that's, I'm going all the way back there because during the G20 in 2010, the densest group worked with us indirectly in understanding and preparing for public order issues that would present themselves in a national security event, which are much different than are the circumstances for public order control in just a large event or a large demonstration. So the densest group on June 2nd, when it was apparent we were having some strained police relations with some protesters in East Liberty, we had some riotous behavior. We had a very tumultuous weekend. And we reached out immediately the next day to the densest group and asked if they would be available to assist us. Public order is their expertise. So we had them lined up. We were ready to go. And then the city started to interfere with our ability to do that. So what we were ready to start on June 3rd was not able to be started until the following February, when the contract was finally approved and let with the city for us to engage the densest group. Now, fortunately, they were collecting and they were aware and they were intended to help us. So, you know, they didn't have to come in fresh and new in February. So the way they do their assessments and their reviews were very objective from our view, because they're looking at it from a law enforcement perspective and public order methods and strategies. They reached out to members of the special units, the special police units. Those officers were reluctant to speak to us directly because of litigation that had, you know, followed by some of the people alleging injury from the weekend. So they didn't want to talk to us. The densest group conferred, and what we did, we took ourselves out of the mix so that there would be less hesitation on the part of the Bureau of Police to talk to these people. So I didn't attend any of those meetings, nor did our staff. We said, fine, you're not comfortable with us being here. We will remove ourselves. Speak to the densest guys because they know what they're doing. You speak the same language, and that's what we want. We want to have a true representation of what transpired that weekend. So arrangements were made that interviews would be set up by the Bureau. And unfortunately, the individual tasked with setting up those interviews left on vacation for a couple of weeks. Had higher priority things to do when that person returned. The long and short of it is, we did not have the cooperation, nor did those interviews ever happen because of their reluctance. So the anecdotal information we were able to obtain from officers was done pretty much off the record. Again, the documents, we had a lot of video from civilians, from media, from stationary cameras throughout the city. We had a lot of information to work with. What we were missing was that firsthand experience from the officers that were involved. And civilians, similarly, declined to cooperate with the investigation. So we tried to, we put it together, and what you see in this report is how we were able to put it together. And the densest recommendations that follow, there are a number of them. Those are the recommendations we wish to get to the Bureau of Police, because I think they will be received with respect. And I think that they can be very constructive in terms of the Bureau's assessment of their crowd control, public order strategies. I mean, just for one example, when you go through the march that went on over in East Liberty up to the Target, and where they had officers staged, members of the CERT team, the special response team, they are under orders. They don't wear anything personally identifiable. They are not permitted to speak to anybody. So we heard a lot about rude officers that wouldn't even talk to the individuals. Well, they're not allowed to. So those kinds of things are nuances that, you know, regular people would not be aware of. But it explained to us why those officers were behaving the way they were behaving, because that's the way their policy requires them to behave, not because they were just being particularly obstinate that night. So that's what we tried to capture and to include in this report for you. And it was very difficult because of the lack of cooperation from the Bureau of Police, as well as the civilian community. But I think that our staff, in conjunction with, and I have to credit Investigator Elwood, Michelle, Sherry, and Stephanie, who made sure that every week they had a meeting with Densis to update where we were, what did we need, what could we do, and what were they doing, so that it was a tightly run review. It's just that we didn't have anybody cooperating with us.
That's one of the issues too, with not having some of the input that was directing the actions of the police officers or those units. Beth, is that because that would help inform as well. I'm the one who helped form. I coordinated, trained, and led the RED team, Rapid Emergency Deployment Team. That was for G20, as you mentioned, in preparation. And then until my retirement, whenever I handed off all those responsibilities and all the materials to whoever was going to maintain it, and then it really fell off for a while, and then I think they decided to re-engage, and that's where some of this different specialized units, SRT, they never called it Rapid Emergency Deployment, I don't think, again. But for this board and for the awareness of the public who may be viewing this as well, some of the decisions there, because I think there were some distinctions made with being present during some of these protests, and the civility of some of it, they allowed certain conduct, and it says that in the reports. But with the specialized units, 3 major decisions are made in these mass events and in trying to keep peace and order. One is it space deprivation? Are we not allowing people to occupy space that they shouldn't? Is it crowd control by directing or guiding, even protecting or separating, or are there arrests or mass arrests that need to be done? Those are 3 critical decisions when monitoring these type of things. And then some of those triggers of which way to go is dependent on the behavior of the crowd. And some of this was actually mentioned in the report. So if you don't have the other portions so that you could speak to that, it's kind of hard to say, well, what was appropriate and inappropriate, a little more difficult. When there could be things like, if an orderly crowd is, everyone's orderly and they're just protesting and they're exercising the First Amendment. Well, when bottles and rocks start flying from some of them, then different decisions need to be made. And so I just think it's disappointing not to have some of that other part, because there could very well be some things that may be looked upon as being excessive or extreme that could be totally appropriate and justified if you have some of the other information. Some people might look at this and says an orderly crowd and police just came in to disperse the crowd. What were the reasons? And some of the data that you have here, that's why I said it was a very good report for what you had to work with. It gets challenging. And so I'm just making reference to that because what appears sometimes in media and the initial reactions that people are saying happened when they were exercising the First Amendment may not play out totally when you have some of these other inputs that help to drive certain decisions. And then we have the difficulty too, that I think from this very same arrest recently, within the last month or so, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, so I'll go on the record as saying this might be wrong, but I think some of the individuals who were arrested, I think charges were dismissed against some of the people who were actually arrested in this event. And I could be wrong if this doesn't relate to that, but I know it was during that time frame.
Yes, there were a group of people who had charges dismissed.
Thank you for that, Mr. Williams. I guess my larger concern is, again, ultimately looking at my role on this board, which I value the role and opportunity I have here, is there's recommendations from this report. And I heard you, Ms. Pittenger, saying that you're thinking that they would be well received. I guess part of my concern is if you didn't even participate in the investigation, one, is that every recommendation you could say, oh, well, you didn't have all the information when you made your recommendation, as an opportunity to kind of discount those recommendations because they weren't a part of it, even though it was at their own doing. And so my bigger concern is, where does all this land? If they're not willing to participate in an investigation, what likelihood would they be to say, all right, yeah, we accept these recommendations, and maybe there's some caveats to some of them because of information that wasn't privy. And I guess I'll just have to see that once it's presented. So thanks everybody for the discussion. And again, I think the report was great. It was really eye-opening to me. I like the way it was presented and laid out. I guess I'm also just wondering, what's the net outcome from this?
I would say, Mr. Robinson, from what I read from the recommendations about, I think I could support Ms. Pittenger's statement about being well received. Being well received and adopted is two different things too, by the way. But I think in the information, it being well received, at least it gives opportunity to explore if there are steps that they could implement the recommendations. And should be thinking forward towards that. I wanted to give you, just as your board member, I think the recommendations that are presented here would enhance and would help in some of this as they approach this. It would be very additive. I don't think they're critical. I think it could be beneficial towards looking at these that could actually enhance the capability of responding to similar incidents in the future.
And that's what I'm hopeful of. And I think that's my concern is if there's and again, obviously the litigation is one thing, but if there's a concern that, oh, the CPRB is out to get us or out to get officers, do they discount something that in actuality could very well make them a stronger force and actually support their work? Like you said, there's things in there that are supportive of actions that were taken. And so, yeah, I hope that the Bureau can see that, and that, yeah, this is here to make everything better for citizens and for the Bureau.
And if we go back to that G20, wasn't that the time when the police review board was kind of rolled over? Wasn't there that also in this mix, if I recall? Is that the time when
the G20, the G20 is when we were schooled in the Criminal History Record Information Act,
right,
restrictions on access to police documents.
Right.
I was on the other side, by the way.
I know. Yes, you were, but that's okay. That's okay.
And I was on the other side.
We don't we don't take, we take all of these experiences as contributing to our maturation.
That's right.
G20, the controversy there was that we had encouraged and sponsored and supported a post-agenda hearing conducted by then chairperson of Public Safety Subcommittee, Bruce Krause. He convened a post-agenda meeting with parties in preparation for the G20 event. And we facilitated that for him. And that included, we actually brought the densist group in because they were recommended by the National Tactical Officers Association.
Right.
We brought in a representative, an executive that worked with the mayor of Washington, D.C. We had the Lawyers Guild, the ACLU, and my apologies, but probably a couple of other individuals. And we facilitated that, which was great. It was a great meeting. It pointed out who was going to have marshals present, kind of the rules of engagement. Was insurance in place? I mean, just things that go along with a huge event like that, which is entirely different as a national security event than anything else that we usually deal with in the city. And so we then afterwards had 89 complaints that we sought to investigate and take care of.
Mm-hmm.
So we subpoenaed reports, and I think it was I don't know, 1,200 pages, Mr. Ward, 300 of which were all magic markered out, blacked out. It actually
a lot of
sent us,
redaction.
yeah, it was offensive. It was awful. So then we went to court. And so when we went to court, instead of we had the city law department defending the city and the insurance company for the G20 event that insured the city. And that's where Criminal History Record Information Act became our nemesis. But the court had been ordering our way. And city council and the city administration, they were all pretty ticked off about that. They weren't quite sure what was going to happen. There was a lot of insecurity there. And so city council, in the first of its kind, and I don't think they've done one since, on June 9th, they passed a will of council asking the review board to withdraw and stop suing the city, to stop its litigation and to stop pursuing what we were pursuing, which was subpoena enforcement and documents and a whole lot of information that we thought was very important to have as we tried to take care of these 89 people. And so one thing led to another, and that's why CREA is now so well known among people seeking police reports, and they can't get them. We fixed that for the entire state, but it pointed out, that there are obstacles out there to ideals that oftentimes our community friends think should just be able to be done. And we uncovered a lot of those obstacles in the course of that, Dr. Gershio, that have, now here we are, and we know what those obstacles are, and we're able to talk about them, and we can encourage legislators to reconsider some of these things in the interest of transparency and accountability. But that's what happened with the G20, that remnants of which, are still with us today.
Thank you, Ms. Pittenger. And just real quick, the resolution you said council passed, what was that?
Yeah. It was a will of council asking the board not to continue in its litigation against the city seeking to obtain information related to G20. And then, just to tie up that story, on June 18th of that year, we were in a hearing in front of Judge Weddick. And when we came out of that hearing, all the media was surrounding, out there outside. We thought, what's this all about? At that time, we were informed that the mayor at the time had removed 5 of our 7 board members. Just like that. Whimsically removed 5 of the members, ostensibly because we did not stop our litigation. And the will of council didn't stop us. The mayor's conduct didn't stop us, because we had an obligation also to the board to get these questions answered. So that's when we then that summer revised the city ordinance with the appointment process. And that just then created a definition of vacancy versus term expiration. It protects members so that you can't be politically or whimsically removed just because. And it protects you. Once you're appointed, you are there to serve your term unless you become disqualified. In that ordinance amendment, we also defined disqualified. We also defined a difference between a term expiration and a vacancy. So we cleaned all that up, and then in 2020, that was ratified in the Home Rule Charter Amendment that states clearly that you will serve your term. That you can't be removed at will. You can only be removed by the mayor with council consent, and it requires a 2/3 vote of council to remove a member. So you're well protected now. And that all started back there with G20.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
on
That's
behalf
the
of
book to be written.
folks, thank you for continuing with that litigation at that time. And obviously for the resulting steps you've taken to kind of strengthen the board.
And it really is, in this report, is a very well done report, at least in my opinion. You did an awesome
you.
job.
Thank you.
Having said
Everybody
that, I
on
think
your
we
team
have-
worked on it.
Yeah, we have the motion on the floor. Did we have a second? I kind of lost it there. So did we have a second on that?
I had seconded.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, members.
Yeah, like
We
I said,
will
figure-
post these and we will provide them this report to the chief of police, who has been awaiting it. He told me that just as recently as last week. So we're hopeful that it will have some constructive use over there. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, can we have the agenda back up, please? Thank you, Stephanie.
I have one other issue that members should be aware of.
Okay.
And let me get that up too. We have the no contact traffic stop ordinance that was adopted by the city in last year, 2021.
Right.
And as a result of that, and actually we don't even know that it had a direct impact on it, that ordinance had a direct impact on it, but I'm not going to get that up there. When the Bureau of Police issued their report a couple of weeks ago on traffic stops in 2021, it showed a very sharp decline on the disparities that we saw in traffic stops among operators, white drivers, black drivers, the zones, the distinctions. or the discernment between zones to what they had prior to, say, 2020 to 2021, and they had fallen drastically. It already showed a huge improvement before that it was even fully implemented, the ordinance. Well, no good deed goes, you know how it goes, but anyway.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Unpunished, I know. There we go. Another history lesson, right? If you recall, there was a consent decree, the first in the country here was in Pittsburgh in 1997. Now that's 25 years ago. When that consent decree was determined completed, and that would have been in 2002, 2003, the community started to recognize its potential for a loss of standardization in policing. The consent decree had like 73 discrete items that the Bureau had to come up to. And they did that. They stayed in compliance as required under the decree, and all was good. But when that consent decree was deemed complete by the federal judge who had jurisdiction, that was the end of it. It was no longer, it had no relevance after that, unless the Bureau voluntarily committed to maintaining those standards. So the community was concerned about how do you make sure that they're going to maintain those standards. And so what the community consensus was, well, let's codify the consent decree. That would not have been prudent. It wouldn't have been beneficial. We had a lot of meetings with our community partners, and we arrived at a decision to pursue accreditation. Now, police accreditation, there are two options to that. One is very expensive. It's a national accreditation. The other is the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, which is under the auspices of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police. Again, there's a local connection to that. When Johnny Gamage died, Governor Tom Ridge ordered across the Commonwealth, find out, he asked the chiefs of police to help. We need to standardize policing across the Commonwealth. They learned that there were no standard practices. Everything was kind of local. Nobody pulled the tooth in Pittsburgh like they pulled the tooth in Scranton. They just did it any old way. So he asked the chiefs of police to come up with some way of providing some accreditation, and they did. And I don't know for sure how many standards there are right now. There was 124 at one point. They're fairly exacting, but if you work, and the Bureau of Police, let me back up a minute here. It was just a couple of years ago in 2011 when they agreed that would be a good idea, but it took until something like 2015, 16, 17, I don't know. But the Bureau did attain the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation, which is, there's a prestige attached to that among departments, and they achieved it. Well, a week or two ago, the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police, the Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, sent a letter to the city of Pittsburgh and the city of Philadelphia saying, you have these no contact traffic stop ordinances locally. They are contrary to the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Code. If you continue or you permit the officers to abide your ordinance, you will lose your accreditation. So that's a problem. We don't want the Bureau of Police to lose its accreditation because it keeps them on their toes organizationally. They have a unit that keeps them in compliance. Their policies are revised as necessary to maintain compliance so that they don't lose accreditation. And now you have a very well-intended policy, a city policy, an ordinance adopted by the legislative body of the city with very unintended consequences, which could be very detrimental. It could be detrimental to the organization's administration, the policy, as well as community perception. Can't you hear it now? Oh, they lost their accreditation. It's through no fault of their own. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself, but it is a threat out there that the PLEAC group is threatening to remove the accreditation for the 2 cities in the Commonwealth that have this no contact harm reduction policy for traffic stops. But you should
Yeah.
be aware of that. I don't know if anything will come of it. I'm hoping we can get it turned around, but you should be aware of that.
Wow.
Beth, if I may add, a few months back when we were presented with an opportunity to sign on to something that had been presented about limiting the traffic stops at that time before this legislation went forward. We had discussion on that. This group did. And at that time, I thought it was healthy as we were all sharing perspectives. And we actually tailored the letter in such a way that it embraced the sentiment of the board, because we wrestled with some of that. And part of that wrestling, I'm gonna tell you, the impetus for where I was contributing was this very thing of not wanting, and the board's consensus was, we don't want to limit police officers from being able to effectively do their duties. And I felt that the slippery slope could be there. Now, my comments then, if we were to go back, I made the comments about, and you added to them, Beth. There is an issue about disparity, and even what you reported today with the marijuana arrests and stuff like that. There's disparity, and notwithstanding, we shouldn't ignore that. But just the very draconian type of way of going about it is just not healthy in policing. And I was mentioning what you brought up about consent decree. One of the things, it put more onus on supervision to be monitoring the behaviors of officers and be able to intervene, interact, or whatever. I think in that regard, I think that's still lacking, and it probably can be done better across the board in the culture of policing. But this was my concern, and my comments are that the very thing that the accreditation was this thing about being contrary to the accreditation is not to give carte blanche that officers can do whatever, but there is some limitations here. And I had that concern then, even understanding the burden of trying to address the issues that bring these matters to light about disparity, pretextual stops, stuff like that absolutely need to be addressed. I think sometimes the tools used to address those may be effective, but how effective in the long term will they be is yet to be determined. And I think that's where this is coming into play. I also do believe, and this is opinion driven, I'm gonna say, but I think some of the pendulum swing as it does in law enforcement. Some of it is the attitudes of officers too, just not wanting to be as proactive as they used to be across the board. There might be an initial benefit to that by seeing some of the disparity be minimized, but there's a consequence, because I don't believe traffic stops, you should go on fishing expeditions and traffic stops. Never did, never taught it, never believed in it. But I do believe that effective policing involves all aspects of a spectrum. And if we're going to do total and appropriate policing, we need to perceive that in that total spectrum and not just carve out pieces of the pie, because it'll render itself in some point. There's going to be a failure on some other end, and we could see even more results from that. So instead, for the sake of not sounding like I'm rambling, I just have concerns about reactions like that. I understand the heart behind it, but I wish that there were other mechanisms that says when you have officers who are doing certain conduct, I mean, that's the time to really address it instead of blanketed rules across the board.
Yeah, consistency and discipline and behavioral expectation. And that's part of what them moving to the IA Pro software and the Inform RMS software will help tighten up that monitoring so that those aberrant issues can be caught, like an early warning, a replacement early warning system that will also monitor the outcomes. If you were disciplined, was that discipline implemented, and when? Yeah.
Yep.
Keeping a tighter control on that so that repetitive behavior doesn't allow to become the norm.
Standard, yeah.
And just quickly, thank you, Sheldon, for your comments. And yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of times when supervision is lacking, you go for what you can, and it's usually more regulation or rules. And somebody worked at Schumann Center for years and saw what the actual issue was, which was a lack of supervision. And then seeing one new rule change after a rule change and new state actions after state actions, ultimately leading to the closure of the facility, with people pointing their finger both ways. And I'm like, it was probably this supervision. Better supervision would have avoided all of that, because you wouldn't have had all these rules that you then couldn't keep up. But yeah, I did have one quick question for you, Beth. Was the alert or the notification from the accrediting bureau, was that something that was released publicly, or where did that come from? Where's that at now? Like, is that in the domain?
I have a copy of it. It was not mailed to me, but I have a copy of it.
Okay. And has the bureau spoke on that?
No, well, I have heard the chief make comment. I think he might have been city council. He has told people about it. Yes, I don't think it's been addressed as a major issue by the administration yet.
Does the letter state a deadline for making some sort of change?
You know what, Mr. Green? That's a good question. I do not recall, but I will look. I bring it up, but I can't seem to pull it up. Nope.
And then because that was an act from council, that would require another ordinance to get them back in compliance ultimately? Or do you think there's wiggle room there to talk with the accreditors? And
well, I think that's the route that it should go, because what we have is a rigid accreditation commission that's not recognizing the best practices, community autonomy to set local policies, and that it's archaic thinking. So we're hoping that we can convince them to be a little bit flexible. Mr. Green, I have to look for this letter. I had it handy, but my technology is not cooperating today at all.
Okay. Been there, done that.
Yeah, I don't know why.
And which accrediting agency was it? You said the Pennsylvania Association?
Oh, it's the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission. And it is through the Pennsylvania Chiefs Association.
Okay.
It's a benefit because it professionalizes your police department.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Oh, it's very, very important. And they had to work hard to achieve it. Here it is. Awesome. There it is. If I can share it. They had to work very hard, and they did a very good job, and they did it, and all is good, and they've maintained it. April 28th is it's dated the 28th. There was a meeting in July. They would like it, whatever it says here, they would like it resolved prior to the next PLEAC meeting scheduled for July. You all are in the way here. I can't see it.
Just slide our screen over. So you can-
Yeah.
I'm trying, and nothing is working right today. Well, let me.
28.
Here we go.
I think that's the 26th.
July 26th.
There we go. There we go.
How do you guys see that?
A meeting is scheduled for July 26th. That would be the revocation of our accreditation. It will be an agenda item for the full commission.
Gotcha.
So I will certainly, here they've all been notified formally by copy. So everybody is aware of it. I've not heard any discussion, although I'm not, always privy to those discussions. So
But it wasn't brought up at council at all.
not that I'm aware of, but
Okay.
I have not monitored council like every meeting, so I can't say that's absolutely certain. Now, I don't know if the Public Safety Committee has dealt with it or not.
Do we want to have a position on it, similar to what you said about working with the accreditation, the PLEA Act, about their standards, or is that getting ahead of it?
Well, I don't see any reason why you could not send a letter to PLEAC and just tell them we don't agree with this. It's a bad idea. I can also confer with the chief, Mr. Robinson, and see what how we could perhaps be supportive, presuming they want to maintain the accreditation, which I believe they do. And then separately also send a letter, focused on how local autonomy and it requires that things be tailored to the community needs and that sort of thing.
I guess I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it goes to what Mr. Williams was saying also. Officers are sworn to uphold all these, the laws and the statutes of the Commonwealth, and the city is subordinate to the Commonwealth. So we have to abide those statutes, and we make adjustments because it would be in the interest of our community. And we have the autonomy to do that with some things, but not all things. And the motor vehicle code is one of those things that is, I think, Mr. Williams, that requires separate authorization for officers to enforce in their jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, the basic understanding, it's not to be criminal, or not to I know it's criminal, but it could be looked at criminal behavior. The main basis for motor vehicle statutes is safety.
Yeah,
that's the real basis for why you enforce traffic laws, is for safety. And so, but how they're being used and stuff, it brings into the conversations about effective policing and some of the things we wrestle with. So from PLEAC is saying, look, there's a safety component when you don't allow officers to enforce traffic laws as they deem appropriate. And I think the standing there has merit. But to what you're saying too, Beth, is that in understanding that, like, I don't even know how to bridge it, but I do understand both aspects of it. I mean, trying to address an issue because of the use of or the deployment of how the enforcement actions are happening and what some of the results are. So it's murky and it's difficult.
And I guess the other direction I'm looking at is looking at council. So if the chief would present this to council, I could see either one of two responses. Oh, we have to undo what we did so we get back right. Or people sticking to their guns saying, no, we were able to reduce disparities. And I don't know if they would have the nuanced discussion that you kind of just shared, right? Like it's not like an A or B necessarily situation. And I'm just wondering, is there a space for us to give comment to council, or for residents to give to council, so that they at least look at it without just saying, yes, totally reverse it or fight it?
well, I can explore that and return to you in June. That's still prior to their July meeting.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an absolute direct point that could be drawn here, really. And I might be, well, I'll just say it. Like that, what you opened up in this meeting, that should be eye-opening for some folks. That says, look with the data. You have quantifiable data that demonstrates the issue, or actually it exposes the issue, that talks about disparity. Like, why couldn't that be opportunity to either better address, or even to acknowledge that, is there some element of issue here that we need to be moving in a better direction? I mean, that would be profitable in of itself. But the data's right there. You reported it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you try to keep your community safer, and then somebody tells you you can't do it. Yeah. Okay, well, why don't I do that? Why don't I gather information and talk to the parties and see if what tact you might want to take after we're fully informed.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's speculation at this point until we hear is prudent. At least that's my opinion.
Well, Beth, thank you for today for such thought-provoking entries into our
Yes.
meeting today.
Exactly.
And thanks,
Everybody hungry?
thanks all the board for leaving space for the discussion.
Yeah.
I think
Perfect.
that I've, one last thing to report, that we have 86 complaints logged so far this year. And I've used enough of your time. I think you're aware now of the most appropriate and things you should be aware of. And I will be very happy to surrender. So, Madam Chair, I have completed my report unless anyone
Thank
has
you.
questions for me. I will take care of the 2 reports that you adopted this evening.
Okay.
And when you get to case review, I just want to make one quick report there, and that will be the end of my comments for the day.
Okay. Being that I don't have any new business, I'm hoping I'm speaking on behalf of Dr. Darby. So if there is none other, can we move to case review, team?
Yep.
All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Thank you. All righty. So there's only a few of us. So if we can motion, second, and discuss, then vote, it will be helpful. All right. So we have 3 cases that we'd like to move to full investigation. Number 049-22, 041-22, 039-22. May I have a motion?
I so move.
Second,
It's second.
discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Ayes have it. Next, we have 2 to move to 30-day extension. And that's case number 035-22 and case number 018-22. May I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Oh, we have an opposed?
That was a cough, I think.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry, these hearing aids aren't working real well today.
Well, that was pretty attentive there, Dr. Gershia. That's good.
We have one that is unsustainable. It's case number 130-200. May I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. We have one case that is unfound. I'm sorry, I think we have three cases that are unfounded. Case number 221-21, case number 121-21, and case number 041-20. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We have one that's in the category of other. That, you know, where once is requested to withdraw this complaint, and it's case number 019-21. May I have a motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. And our last case for this evening is 001-22 that we are moving to suspension. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And we have these are the possible closing dates for continued suspension. We have 14 of those. Now, if there's any discussion on them as I go through, just let me know, because we could just stop it because there's a whole bunch of them. So I think the first one is 171-21, 16521, 16021 ED, 14821, 13821, 09921, 25220, 112-20, 217-19, 190-19, 292, 029, I'm sorry, -19, 016-19, and 87-18 ED, which is a pretty old one. That's from 2018.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I believe you skipped over one.
sorry, which one?
The second from the top of the last page, 041-20.
I'm sorry, my bad. I'd like to add that to number 14. So may I have a motion to do possible closing dates of these 14?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Now, I believe that ends our case review for this evening.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I would like to make a brief report that a case number 19220 has been removed from the public hearing track,
Oh, yes.
and that is due to a subject officer leaving your jurisdiction. And the second officer that was named in that complaint, that the allegations were unsustainable. You did conduct a pre-hearing conference prior to this board meeting tonight, at which time that was all memorialized.
Indeed. Do we need a motion on that?
Nope, you already heard it.
Okay, at the pre-hearing, that's
Yes.
sufficient? Okay, thank you. Alrighty, the agenda, please. Thank you, Stephanie. It's coming. Thank you. So, just, do we have anybody that would like to speak? Before I tell us about our next meeting, I would like to see if we have any. I'm looking into the Q&A and I'm looking in the chats and seeing a remark that someone's wishing us all happy and meaningful.
That's the Ozarks.
Okay. Thank you, Ozarks.
Same to you, though.
Thank
sir.
you. Yep, thank to you. And to my colleagues, same to all of you, and to those who served, your family who's not with us, thank you for their service.
Thank you.
There's two people in the Q&A.
Okay,
Clayton Davis would like to talk and a Rondell Franklin. So
okay, we'll start with Mr. Davis. And Mr. Davis, you have 3 minutes. So please, and then after him, Mr. Franklin, then you'll have 3 minutes. Okay, that statement is Miss Elizabeth Pittenger. Would you like to answer this question?
No, I didn't intend to do that, but I didn't intend to make that option. But I am certainly happy to answer any question for Clayton Davis that I can.
Okay,
Are you still with us, Mr. Davis? He could talk. Could he? He wants to speak.
I'm
please
trying
do.
to, I'm
Okay.
trying to get him to unmute.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm trying to work my way over there. Sorry.
that's okay.
Okay, he should be able to talk now.
Okay, hello?
Hello, Mr. Davis.
Yes, I had a question. I had a problem with an officer and the way he spoke to my family with vulgar language and just a lot of disrespect to them. Well, how is that fair to the community when the officers speak to us in a way and then they justify the way they talk to say they spoke to you in a rude way, but it's okay for them to do that? But you can't talk back to them at that level? And if you do, you get disorderly conduct charges?
Did you make a formal complaint, Mr. Davis?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Mr. Davis, that kind of conduct is not acceptable. We would consider that to be conduct unbecoming toward the public and generally unbecoming because it would obviously, it would undermine your confidence and trust in the Bureau of Police. Plus, rude and discourteous. We have a hearing every so often. If you would like to participate in that, that hearing is scheduled for the purpose of people having experiences like you described, to come and tell the board precisely what happened. It's different than filing a regular individual complaint, but it is an opportunity for people who have had the inconvenience and the displeasure of engaging with an officer who is rude and discourteous to tell the board about it.
Okay, well, part of the
but
thing
I-
I have is, you mentioned the police decree back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I was a young man, teenage years, when that decree came about. And then part of it was because of the abuse that people in low-income communities were receiving from the police, and no one was listening or they cared about it. And then when it went federal, everybody started paying attention. And then when you said the decree went away, it was like, okay, we're not being watched under a microscope. Let's go back to doing what we were doing. And now it seems that that's just a big circle again. So why can't we look into maybe getting a decree put back in place to weed out these bad officers that the decree helped weed out the first time?
Beth, do we have a next hearing set for the public to speak?
No, we don't have a date certain. I would suspect, though, we could probably do it this fall.
Maybe we
And
could
for
talk-
those that, if you're not familiar with it, Mr. Robinson especially, when we have a number of individuals who have had an experience such as Mr. Davis described, we pull them all together and conduct this hearing so that they can all come at one time and speak to you, rather than going through a whole investigation and leading to somewhere that's they're not going to be satisfied, and it's not going to satisfy the expectation that police should be courteous. So we ask them all to come back. Usually when we have about 12 of those individuals is when we convene the hearing, Mary Jo.
Okay, thank you. So,
Let me finish with Mr. Davis quickly.
okay,
You don't deserve to be talked to that way, Mr. Davis. I would be very hesitant to say that would give you license to talk back and talk to that officer the way he talked to you, because that would put you in a very serious situation. And you're right. Chances are you would be charged. And it's not okay. It's not right. But we know that they do that. Our emphasis is looking at the supervision of the Bureau of Police. How can they be more effective? How do we how are people promoted in the Bureau? What is the standard criteria for a promotion? Is it based on merit? Have they demonstrated? Are they able to lead people? The kinds of things that a hands-on supervisor would never tolerate from an officer, because they would be aware of it, and that would reduce the incidence of that kind of rude and discourteous behavior. We're a long way from there, but we're getting there. I'm sorry you had that experience.
thank you for speaking out, Mr. Davis. And please, when the chair will be back, I'm sure that she will lead us to picking a date sometime this fall. Again, thank you very much for speaking out. Mr. Franklin, you have 3 minutes, sir. Please begin when you're able.
Mr. Rondell's not able to talk because he has an older version of Zoom that won't allow him.
Would he like to type something?
Yes.
Okay, please do, sir. We're able to see what you type. Maybe it's in the Q&A. Let me see.
Yeah, I don't see him in chat.
I'm looking in Q&A now.
There we go.
I was typing to him, Beth, to see if he
I
could.
see that. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. He's apologizing. It's his first time. He's trying to keep up.
No worries.
Yep. He wants to talk about the case he has with us.
Okay.
May I have make a suggestion that we for our meetings, because the participants of the meeting have 3 minutes, that we at least prompt them to begin. They don't have to send it, but start typing their question ahead of time, so that at the appropriate time they would be able to send and interact, because this could take up some of the person's time just trying to articulate what their question is.
Yeah, because I have the clock running and we're at almost 1:30 now. But I did, when he put something in the chat before, I did say, would you like to speak at the end? And he put, yes, I would love to. At that point, you're right. I should have written back to him and said, start typing if you can't, get on. But well, if I chair in the future, I certainly will make
I
that.
think that would just be wise as we open our meeting, make that standard while we're
Yeah.
in Zoom.
Yeah, good idea.
I can make him a panelist and he can speak.
That'd be awesome.
Okay,
That'd be great.
okay, great. So, Mr. Davis, you should be able to speak. There he is.
I think it's Mr. Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is Mr. Franklin. He's on.
Did everyone see what he typed?
No.
No.
I can read it for you if you like.
Oh, cool.
Hello? Oh, wait, okay, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have my computer's like slowly updating with everything, and I normally don't have Zoom unless it's for my son for his school, so I don't really use Zoom very often. My case that I have with you guys, I want to thank you all first, because Miss Hunt, who is the investigator on mines, has been very thorough with my investigation and my complaint, technically, with the police that that forcibly stopped me and illegally detained me at the Pittsburgh police headquarters. I truly hope and keep praying that you guys are going to work hard at keeping these officers in line and doing their jobs correctly. And I tell people honestly, when this stuff happened to me, the best way to explain it is that, people, I compare their jobs to making a hamburger. And if you don't make a hamburger correct, you get sick, you can die, or you can be sued for that. And your job isn't much different from making a hamburger and making sure that it's correct for that person. The situation I went through is very traumatizing because I'm a young Black man who is a published author. I go to work, I come home, I take care of my son. I just kind of, go through my day, staying out of trouble. And for what happened to me and how it happened, and then how they're just trying to cover up their mistakes has been, it's just appalling in every way, because my stepfather is a cop, and it's put me in a position in my life that I don't even feel comfortable being around him in his own uniform, and I've never had that problem ever. So I just want to tell you guys thank you so much, and trying to keep these guys accountable to doing their jobs correctly, because anything can go wrong and they could kill somebody just thinking that this is like the Wild Wild West, that they can do whatever they want, and it's not correct that they can do that. That's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And we're glad that you followed the process, and I'm glad you're working with Ms. Hunt. And we may see your case here in a month or two. But thank you very much for reaching out and letting your voice be heard. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And thank you for acknowledging the investigator on this as well. That they need to hear that as well. They work hard.
They do.
Oh yeah, yes they do. She's very detailed in getting all the information as much as possible. And I told her honestly, I said the problem that most police officers are going to run into is that some people have very good memories and they have detailed memories. And me being a writer, and I also I also direct short films here in Pittsburgh. I have a dialogue recall, so I can recall everything that's said to me in one entire setting. And you don't want to deal with people that are that good at that, because it puts you in a position where you know you've done wrong. And instead of just apologizing and saying you did wrong, you continue to do these heinous acts trying to cover up your mistakes that you made. And that's not correct. And I can't even, with my normal job as security for Amazon. So, but she's very good at what she does.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging her. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
No
I
problem.
appreciate that, Rondell.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, I don't believe there's anybody else that said they wanted to speak. So, without any further business, I want to make sure that everybody knows our next regular meeting is on June 28th. And it will be Zoom. And hopefully you will have your regular chair back next month.
You did a fantastic job, Dr. Gershio. I will be absent board from that meeting because of travel.
Okay. Enjoy and have a safe trip.
Thank you.
And think of us. If you're at the beach, really think of us, because then we're going to be anxious.
Definitely ain't the beach. I'll be talking to some more of these police matters.
Okay.
Train
We
them right.
appreciate all your work. We really do. And everybody, please have a safe and wonderful Memorial Day. And we'll see everybody June 28th.
We need to adjourn.
May I have a motion for 7:55 p.m.?
I
Motion.
so move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Enjoy, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night to guests too. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
What's that, what's that show? Good night. Oh, come on.
The Waltons.
Yeah, thank you. Good night, Mr. Walton.
Good night, John Boy.
Yeah.